of monsters, what are you thinking of? Maybe Indominus Rex, the hybrid beast, maybe even Cloverfield, the giant monster. Now, what about the D-Rex, the hybrid dinosaur that we saw from the Jurassic World new trailer? We know a little about him. We know that he looks dangerous, he looks really scary, but can he fight? That's what we're gonna figure out in today's video. I mean, the video's title is literally, can the D-Rex even fight according to science? Big shout out to Goji Center for the video, and let's jump right in here.
The D-Rex has been the subject of controversy.
I'm excited for this movie, man.
For quite some
Let me
time
know in the
now,
comments,
with
how
public
excited
opinions
are you
being close to polarized,
for
with
Jurassic
some
World Rebirth?
absolutely hating it, while the other half being speculatively
It's about 50-50.
optimistic.
I'm
Today
ready
on
for it.
Goji Center, we will
I'm
bring
excited.
the D-Rex back to the analysis platform and attempt to answer the following question: could this animal actually be a good combatant in real life?
I mean, I
That
think
is,
he could.
applying the rules of
He looks like he
realism
could.
backed up by physics and biology. Of course, we will be discussing the combat abilities of the mutant from the fictional perspective as well.
I don't know, bro.
Then,
Let's see.
in the second half of this episode,
It's
we'll
definitely the
find
most
out if this
interesting
animal could do
dinosaur
so
I've ever
much as
seen.
to even hold its own weight, once set upon
Hold
by
its own weight.
reality. Not too long ago, soon after the trailer for Jurassic World Rebirth dropped, the Goji Center modeling team got to work
Yeah, they
to
went
build a
in. Shout out to
speculative
Goji once again.
reconstruction of the so-called
Always bringing
D-Rex,
those fire
based on the
videos.
very few shots we were able to see. You may have also run into this model shown in other places. But turns out this model
Other
ended up being
places.
around 90%
That's it.
accurate. A couple of recent figure leaks have revealed that the D-Rex will have a slightly more bulbous shape to its head, heavier frontal
Wait, what is that?
body,
Is that one of
and
the figures?
slightly more robust legs. With a slight touch
See,
up
they be
on the
bringing out the
coloration,
toys,
we
man.
will be using this slightly updated
Before they
model
bring
to
out the
speculate
movie.
upon during the fictional combat analysis. From the moment where the Spino wrenched the bull's head out of place, it was clear
Got
that
'em.
this precedent of having a big showdown between two dinosaurs was something that would be present in every film after.
I gotta go ahead and bring this up. So obviously D-Rex is like, you know, the hybrid dinosaur we're gonna see in this, right? What do you think is the coolest hybrid dinosaur that Jurassic World or in dinosaur movies in general have brought out? You know, we got the Scorpius and we got all those, you know. What is your favorite hybrid you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments. D-Rex
Therefore,
is
it wouldn't
really cool,
be improbable
but like
that D-Rex
Indominus
will
Rex,
face another foe close to the end of the film.
That's currently my favorite.
Especially with a packed roster of other
Of the
animals like
hybrids.
3 Spinos, a T-Rex, and sea-splitting Leviathan, just to name a few. This made us think, given the probable opponents that D-Rex could probably face, what about this
Indoraptor
animal could
was really
make
cool,
it a
too.
force to fear in the battlefield? And seems like we are ready to break down the D-Rex.
Let's go.
First order
Breaking
of
them down.
business, double-checking the size of this thing. No official
Big
stats
fella.
have been posted, so
Real
we
big
could
fella.
be in for some big surprises here. Now, because we are dealing
I mean,
with a
he looks
franchise
big
where
from, like, the
animals fluctuate
one
shot by shot depending
shot
on what
we
looks
got
better
of
for the
him.
camera,
Oh, we got
we are
two, but,
going
you
to
know.
be a bit flexible with our metrics, and thus potential damage inflicted by this animal. In this scene of a dockside
Like, look at the
confrontation,
hands
we
compared to
can see
the
that
people.
the D-Rex's knuckle-walking wrist is on level ground and distance with these people. The wrist is about on level with the actors' heads, and most of these peeps in this shot are around 5 to 5'6" tall. Taking
So about
this to the
6
model and
foot
using
on
some
just the-
leeway to be conservative, this mutant
hands?
winds up somewhere between 25 feet tall in a more upright stance
Ooh.
and 20 feet in a more lower position.
That's a big
Either
fella.
of which could give it a length of over 50 feet long. Using the
50
volumetric
feet
analysis
long?
method we normally use on the channel,
Remember,
we are
this
looking
is
at a
sort of
creature
still
that
speculation.
shatters the previous predatory dinosaur
We don't
record
know
at
too
over
much yet.
25 to possibly 35,000 kilograms. It's worth noting that it is
That's so
not
much- that's so
impossible
many
that
pounds.
this thing is even bigger. And even just a slight increase in overall height can result in the already gigantic mass more than doubling. If, for instance, the D-Rex is, say, 25 to 35 feet in height, we could be looking at a staggering 55 to 65,000 kilos.
Oh my
now,
gosh.
It is actually very
60
likely that
tons
the
at least.
creators of this animal, as most movie creature artists and writers tend to do, will make the D-Rex a good deal lighter. Despite this, we feel pretty
Why not,
confident
you know?
to say that D-Rex has a good shot at taking the title of biggest land predator
Ooh,
in the franchise.
look at the size,
As
bro,
for
even above the
lethality,
Spino
that
spine.
remains to be seen
That's
by
a big
official
boy.
sources. This thing could wind up a horrifying warrior or a horrid wimp. But we do love showcasing
Not the
violent
wimp.
horrors
He
on
can't
this
be a wimp.
channel, so let's look and see what we can speculate from what we got. The arms. Unlike its likely genetic template, the T-Rex.
Oh yeah, he's got arms, so he's gonna be able to punch.
Leveraging those arms that give it such a huge size.
He's gonna be able to do so much more
weapons and tools
than normal,
Assuming
you know,
the
T-Rex
mentioned
Spinos.
Earlier are close to accurate.
Endo.
These arms could reach up to 20 feet, with pointed talons almost a meter long.
And what if they're strong?
Based
He
on
could
the
just throw
volumetric
them.
number discussed earlier, each arm might have a mass of over 5,000 to 6,000 kilograms.
That's
Now,
crazy.
Because we're
A boy's
talking about a
beefy.
fictional animal in a fictional universe, we won't expect physics to be present, imposing any limits. A longer arm like this will grant the D-Rex more reach. This attribute alone could be a big reason why this animal could be one of the best combatants seen in this franchise.
Yeah, if you got arms,
to kill
man.
this animal, it would need to be wounded on any vital organ, that being a blow to the cranium, violently snapping the spinal cord,
And
or
good luck
piercing
getting
the
there,
torso
you know?
and disemboweling.
The spine
All
looks
maneuvers
thick,
that
the head.
must be done at close proximity.
How you gonna
This
get
is
close, you know?
difficult to do against an animal that can keep you at bay at a 20-foot distance, risking
It's that simple.
catastrophic injury if the D-Rex manages to connect. That is, especially with those talons.
Yeah.
In this simulation, you'll see what would more or less happen to a Parasaurolophus
Look at the parry. What are we
if struck
doing?
with such force.
Ugh.
Assuming that in the film, the
Ooh.
D-Rex can whirl their arms
Oh,
around
dang.
like this. Additional attack methods will
He's got
be
that
the ability
one-shot
to
power.
grab and manipulate objects with the lengthened
That's one
digits,
punch dino.
possibly picking up smaller creatures, bringing them close to the mouth, or perhaps even grabbing the legs or arms of the opponent, knocking it off balance. Note that this animal always has one
He is
forearm
some
on the
cheese.
ground. Because this animal is forward heavy, it will be imperative for this creature
He is
to
forward
always
heavy.
keep
And
one
he's got
hand
a-
pressed against
he's got a
the
lot of
floor,
weight
lest it risks
towards the
toppling
front.
over. We do have a lot more to discuss regarding this weapon in this next section. But now that we've established
He
that
looks
this
so
animal
cool,
will
dude.
likely inflict blows with its arms, let's talk about those teeth. We can expect that the set of jaws
Looking sharp.
reminiscent of Tyrannosaurus could also be pretty lethal, even with a less than ideal body. This franchise is, frankly, quite horrible at accurately showcasing the bite damage of each of their theropods.
Hey, that's okay. We
T-Rex
like
bites
it.
Constantly
All right?
shrugged off
I
by
just
other
like movies,
theropods
man.
with ease. Indoraptor
I
jaws
don't look too
without
crazy
serrated
into
teeth,
'em.
able to cleanly bite through an arm, and Indominus without any
Ooh.
visible and appropriate neck and jaw muscle attachments to bite through a reinforced glass and steel spherical structure.
That's true.
All examples of Jurassic either overestimating or underestimating the bite forces these theropods should have. Our best guess is that the D-Rex will be no different. However, to its merit, a jaw structure shaped like this should still inflict a devastating bite force. A 2022 study by Manabu Sakamoto looked into the mechanics of
They done
theropod
brought
jaw
in the
muscles across
studies.
different families. It was found that doubling the size of a Tyrannosaurus and keeping broadly similar jaw design results in a bite force increasing by about 53 to 60%.
That's
in the movie,
crazy.
we can expect D-Rex to be able to
So
bite
this dude,
down
bro,
with up to 80,000
this dinosaur
newtons of force
is gonna
if
be
it
so
was built to
dangerous.
withstand such pressure.
Obviously,
we'll
but, like-
touch on this later when physics makes itself present.
All the
But
new
for
stuff we
reference,
learn.
If you still feel lost when we mention newtons, an adult, healthy human male can bite down with a force of anywhere between 150 to up to 300 newtons. A saltwater crocodile is more than 16,000 newtons. T-Rex
Yeah,
ranges
we
between
rank very
35
low.
to
Oh my-
63,000. So, in the movie, the T-Rex should
And what's this
probably
big fella?
bite down with equal force,
80,000?
if not greater. These bites will likely be
That's
seen
so insane.
after the limbs get involved, with this mutant positioning the victim within biting range with its long limbs, biting down and wrenching chunks of flesh similar to
Is
its
that the
more,
Indominus right there? What is
less
that?
mutated cousin.
That was on the ground.
Lastly, it's important to mention the use of sheer mass, its posture, and the tail.
We
As
don't know what the
mentioned
D-Rex is
already, we're
mixed with,
talking
right?
about an animal
Obviously the
anywhere
T-Rex, but, like,
between
what else?
25 to 35,000
I forgot if we
kilograms.
know that or not.
Putting physics aside, this mutant would be a force to be reckoned with on land. Using its body as a weapon, any other theropod getting hit by this charging animal would have to take forces similar to getting hit by a
Not my
semi-truck.
Spino!
Enough to disbalance their
Come on,
center of
Spino.
gravity and make it very difficult for an animal to
Ah.
stay standing. A clear height advantage means this creature would have a better view of its opponent when it comes to detecting points of destabilization and pretty much situational awareness.
I like how they haven't
You may have
showed,
heard
like,
that
what the
during
D-Rex's
combat,
name
it's always
is.
better
It's
to
just
have the
D-Rex.
higher ground.
What's the D
In
stand
such
for?
cases, this is because
Dominant?
you have a better view of what's going on during
Dominant
a confrontation,
Rex?
and the fact that
That'd
it's
be
harder
fire,
for the
actually.
enemy to fight uphill. D-Rex, as long as it maintains itself in a wide posture, would have this advantage given to them by
Death
default.
Rex?
The mutant does still
Let me know
seem
what
to
you
have
think
a
it is in the
fairly
comments.
long
Give me
tail
some
like
names.
its genetic forebearer.
Deadly
Not
Rex.
too much of a surprise, considering the hindquarters don't seem to be as badly mangled. If it were ever to use this tail as a weapon, it would have to find a way to swing its body relatively
Yeah,
quickly.
so the tail's not
which
really a
an
weapon.
animal
I don't
like
think we're gonna
this
see tail
likely
whips
wouldn't
much.
be able to do.
But the
Even in
arms,
the fictional realm,
the bite?
moving in such a way would require this animal to rotate comically fast. So, that said, getting hit by the tail would rather be the result of getting in the way. With the volumetric estimate, this tail might have over 2,000 kilograms of mass in it.
That's a lot of weight,
in the
but-
unfortunate event that another animal gets in the way of a tail moving a few meters per second, this would be like getting hit by a charging elephant.
Dang!
Accidentally getting hit in the face trying to flank the D-Rex might bowl over even some of the bigger carnivores in the setting. So, to conclude this section of the video, we can expect the D-Rex to be a good combatant given its anatomy, but more so because this takes
Kinda
place
figured
in a
that one.
fictional universe not bound by the rules of physics. However, enter biological constraints and real-life science, and you'll find out why we haven't seen anything like this in the present day or in the fossil record.
Thankfully, present day.
How
My
functional
goodness, could you
is
imagine?
the body type of this mutant?
That would be
the
so
best way
bad.
to describe it would be workable, but not ideal. To begin, let's set the tone as to how the rest of this episode is going to go. This animal would probably be slow as if it could even stand upright.
That boy's
is.
slow with it.
Let's remember that colossal juggernauts like the Tyrannosaurus and Giganotosaurus were already pushing on how big an agile predator can get and still be able to move relatively quickly. The D-Rex would have
They
an
are
easier
pretty
time
quick,
holding
too.
up more weight with an extra set of support limbs, but this comes at the cost of agility. It all comes down to physics. A two-legged biped only needs to move half as many limbs to turn around as a four-legged quadruped. To be clear, plenty of quadrupeds are plenty nimble themselves, but this gets harder and harder after a certain size. This is probably one of the big reasons why theropod dinosaurs largely never went back to standing on all fours. Being bipedal gave them a much better ability to maneuver and accelerate quickly, at the cost of not being able to bear as much weight. Facultative bipeds like hadrosaurs can enjoy a bit of both worlds.
Those are
but
adorable.
only if their center of gravity is
Put a
situated
D-Rex in
close
there.
to the hip and
See
they
how
have
adorable it is
sturdy,
then.
strong, and somewhat short hind limbs to be stable. These could easily change their stance without losing their balance. That tall, lanky build is great for uncanny monster design, but terrible at structural support and strength needed to keep itself in a fight. As mentioned already, with all that mass and with that tall of a stance, this means that when using those massive arms, the D-Rex would probably
Bro,
only
I
be able
cannot
to
wait
use
to see
one of
this
its
monster.
arms
That's
at
like
a
the
time.
main thing I'm
Taking
excited
both off
for
the
in this
ground
movie.
For too long would risk compromising its stance and stability.
When they announced it, I was
especially if
hoping they'd
wrestling
have a
large
hybrid.
prey or a thrashing
I didn't know
opponent.
it would
What
look like
about
this.
that knuckle walking? This method of getting around is a specialized kind of locomotion that is developed.
That is a
multiple
weird
times
way of
amongst
getting
mammals
around. Other
and
than-
some
well,
other
apes do it, I
animals.
guess.
But it doesn't
Gorillas?
appear theropod dinosaurs ever had this feature. After all, outside of maybe some spinosaurs, theropods were
Does the
always
spino walk like
agile
that?
bipeds. Short of adding DNA
I
from
didn't know
something
that.
else, no amount of Hox gene manipulation should wind up giving an altered tyrannosaur a look resembling Primeval's future predator or the Death Angels. Realistically, an animal
That's
that
a
was
good
supposed
comparison,
to end up
actually.
walking like this but ended up like this would have lots of trouble figuring out how to move around, let alone have the instincts to cope. Walking would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Something that could make the body type a bit more viable would be if the edited genes ended up creating a second set of legs instead. It would still be very awkward and unbalanced, but the instinct on how to use those limbs properly would be there. In the real world, some animals have survived with horribly deformed and extra limbs in the wild before.
Poor pig.
Things get even worse when it's time to throw hands. Theropod dinosaur arms
Yeah,
had
when it's
plenty
time to
of
throw
range of
hands,
motion, with a
it's a wrap
2024
if you're
study
fighting a
showing that
D-Rex.
they were mobile and strong enough to pull the arms close to the body after snatching prey. When it comes to rotating the shoulder and the wrist, the range of motion is a lot smaller than that of a primate. The reason you see movie monsters like King Kong picking up and manipulating objects or swinging themselves around is because apes have a specialized shoulder anatomy, including a large ball and socket joint that allows them to whirl their arms around at almost 360 degrees. Back to the D-Rex, when this extra long limb developed, it might have been a mutated limb influenced by the longer, stiffer legs, resulting in an extra set of abnormally long forelimbs. Therefore, D-Rex would not have the ape-like
So he wasn't
range of
supposed
motion.
to have that.
Instead,
It just kinda
these
happened.
limbs would simply swing up and down, forward and backward.
Don't have
with
a lot
the
of
only
motion. My
viable
boy's
combat
going up,
maneuvers being
down.
grasping and bludgeoning.
It's about
Still,
it.
A multi-ton limb does mean that just getting smacked by one of these arms could produce forces of up to 900,000 to 1.2 million newtons with a perfect hit, comparable to having
1
a Ford
million
F-150 thrown at you at 40 miles per hour.
Oh no, I'm cooked at that point.
However,
40 miles per hour getting
in
hit
terms of
by a
plausible
truck.
physics, an arm not capable of bearing this much weight to begin with would likely be injured if it tried smacking something this hard. As for the jaws, therein lies some other issues. Recall that in the
look
fictional
at that jaw, it
viability
looks
segment,
broken.
we mentioned that D-Rex would bite down with 80,000 newtons of force. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You wouldn't want to get killed by your own weapon, so the skull has to be ideally built to withstand all of that force. Nature took millions of years to fine-tune the great force of the theropod jaws, let alone develop in
Nature's
such a way
wild,
that they
bro.
can withstand the
Oh,
force
Mother
of their
Nature.
own bite.
Shout out to
In
her.
2022, a study by Stefan Lautenschlager showed that almost everything in the skull, from the point of the jaws to the shape of the eye socket, has
look at
some
the eyes.
aspect to help transfer all of that force into the bite, but also withstand that same force, keeping it from breaking its own face. This would be especially
Could you
true
imagine?
with
You had a bite so
Tyrannosaurus,
strong you just
which had
break your face.
keyhole-shaped eye
That'd be
sockets to
terrible.
help distribute such forces. Channel viewers might remember this was specifically why our
Ultima.
hybrids like the Ultima, Imperatrix, and the 2.0 used other sturdy-skulled creatures like the Triceratops and short-tailed
We be
shrew
using
in
them over on the
mix.
Kaiju Capi
What does
channel.
this
Shout out
mean
to
for the
Goji, by the
T-Rex?
way.
While the jaw is mostly intact from the suspected Tyrannosaurus base, the upper half of the head is malformed and distorted. Considering this is also where the main jaw muscles like the adductor mandibuli externus muscle attach, the D-Rex might have a much lower bite force than the T-Rex of the same size. Too much force and this malformed skull could likely shatter. But let's say an actual animal in the shape, some kind of reptilian primate equivalent, did exist. Maybe minus the extra vestigial arms, of course. How big
That
could
would
this
be
animal
terrible.
get? This too would probably be limited by the knuckle walking. There is a good reason why virtually
You could
every
probably
single
escape
type of
that thing,
animal
to be
that
real
managed
with
to
you,
break
though.
16 tons had
He'd
pillar-like
probably
legs
be
built to
slow in
hold
real
them
life.
up. Examples being Hadrosaurs
You'd be
like
able to escape.
Edmontosaurus and Shantungosaurus, the mega mammals like Paleoloxodon and Paraceratherium, and of course,
The
sauropods.
names, man.
That's what's needed to maintain stability moving around a body that heavy and holding it up 24/7. If one wanted to keep this body form, dropping a lot of weight to be closer to some of the largest knuckle walkers in history, like the biggest of the big ground sloths, might be a better range to start from.
And that's a
progress
slow
from
fella
there.
right there.
Something along the lines of 6,000 to 10,000 kilograms is probably pushing the limits. There are still plenty of other problems with
What do
this
you think, guys?
malformed
Let me know any of your
monstrosity.
opinions
Teeth
on the
might be some of
D-Rex.
the hardest
Name,
material in the body,
weight,
but they are
moves.
extremely breakable
Let me know in the
under
comments.
right
What do you guys think?
circumstances. Teeth are, in essence, minerals, and certain minerals weaken when not hydrated. Tooth enamel, what covers the outside of the teeth, are one such example. This is why a vast majority of exposed tusks are mostly made of dentin, which is still sturdy but can withstand getting dried out more. For the D-Rex trying to chomp down as hard as a T-Rex could or more, it's going to need some of that enamel. Exposed teeth like this could cause the enamel to over time weaken
And you know
start
he ain't
fracturing.
Russian.
Split teeth, fractured roots, and nasty infections can follow, which would then cut short the lifespan of this predator. All we have discussed so far, it really is just
All that
the
we've
tiny
discussed,
tip of the iceberg.
and I'm still excited.
Beneath the skin
Even
lies
more
a
excited.
severely altered internal anatomy. Realistically speaking, if a mutated animal like this would ever exist, there would be a plethora of issues affecting things beyond
That's true.
mutated
He could have
limbs and
problems
bone
we don't know
structure.
about yet.
The body can sometimes do remarkable things to cope with catastrophic injury or deformities, but it can only do so much. If the limbs are affected to this degree, it is certain that the nerves, muscles, and joints under the surface
He just
are
looks
also badly
uncomfortable in
affected.
that animation,
Neural
at least.
disorders, severe arthritis, and psychological issues can be very common with deformities this severe.
I hate
Signals
walking on the
brain sends
wrists.
to move just one set
Oh,
of
that's
limbs
so
could get
uncomfortable.
scrambled and distorted. Complex tasks like running might become extremely difficult, if not impossible. The D-Rex is a terrifying new addition to the nightmares mankind's folly has brought out
That's
in
facts.
this franchise.
What a statement.
In a world bound by real-life biology and physics, it might be best to describe the beast as surviving rather than thriving.
Fact. Surviving rather than thriving. That's like the thing that's gonna stick with me. Do you think the D-Rex is comfortable in his own skin, or is he just completely uncomfortable while he's walking around? That could change how he, how he fights in the movie. All of that to say, thank you for watching with me, guys. I will see you in tomorrow's video. I love ya. Goodbye.